The malicious say that the language of Malta is like if an Italian would try to speak Arabic. However, he only speaks English. This complexity can be experienced in not only the language, but also the whole mentality and lifestyle of the people living here. Malta is located in the heart of the Mediterranean Sea, close to the coast of northern Africa and only 1,000 kilometers from Sicily. The archipelago is part of the British Commonwealth, so it's quite obvious that Arabic, Italian, and British and other cultures influenced it. Malta's language basically is related to the Semitic language family, and so is related to Arabic and Hebrew. It's the only surviving form of the Phoenicians' language, so this is truly unique. The capital of the Maltese archipelago of 3 inhabited and 2 uninhabited islands is Valletta. Valletta is built on a peninsula surrounded by 2 bays. After the Turkish siege, the Pope sent his architect, Francesco Laparelli, here, who, together with Girolamo Cassar, the chief architect of the Order of Knighthood, planned the symmetrical square reticulated street structure of the new town. For the construction, they used rocks extracted underneath the town area. Therefore, today there's a several-kilometer-long tunnel system running under Valletta. The Opera House was bombed during World War II. There are plans for the rebuilding, however, it's better not to expect its opening in the next 1 or 2 years. The busiest street of Valletta is Liberty Street, starting from the town gate. We can recover from the fatigue of sightseeing by sitting on one of the cafe terraces. The most famous is the Café Cordina. Behind the cafe, inside the beautiful library, there's an audiovisual exhibition on the history of the St. John. The sound and picture effects are cutting edge. The Palace of the Grand Masters lasted 1 decade, starting from 1570. The Renaissance building has been both the master's office and residence. Today, it's a presidential palace and meeting place of the House of Commons. The tables placed on the wall of the inside yard remind us the vistas of the Pope and the Queen. The interest of the Tricaldesca, which is parallel to Liberty Street, is that it was the only street in Valletta where the knights have been allowed to fight a duel. Near there are the Toy Museum and a small private palace, the Casa Rocca Piccola, where paintings from the 15th to 17th centuries are exhibited. Nowadays, there are only 8,000 inhabitants living in the city. Many moved out to the suburbs. In Valletta, traveling by car is problematic because they drive on the left and it's hard to find a parking place. It's better if we visit the inner areas by walking or by a small horse carriage called kerosene. The star-shaped St. Elmo is built on the former place of a watchtower. Some scenes of the Oscar-winning film Gladiator were shot here. Inside, we find a World War museum, converted from the command center of the British Air Defense. Besides others, General Eisenhower's Jeep, named Husky, is guarded here, as well as 3 contemporary airplanes of the Maltese Air Force. Ones even a little interested in military history can spend illuminating hours here. The name of the St. John Cathedral indicates that it received its cathedral status from the Pope together with its fellow Mdina. The building represents a classical Byzantine basilica. We can see simple, clear forms on the outside and rich baroque interior. In olden times, the congresses of the knights were held here. When Napoleon's army ravaged Malta, the Silver Gate was painted black in order to prevent the soldiers recognizing how valuable it was. The flooring of the main ship is made from 400 carved, colored, marble gravestones, under which knights rest. 12 Grand Masters are buried here, among them de la Vallette, whose coffin was brought over from the triumphal Laodicean temple in the St. John fortress. Caravaggio's famous painting, titled St. John's Beheading, is exhibited in the Cathedral Museum. The painter escaped from Naples to Malta after he killed his enemy. The painter's signature on the painting is noteworthy as it's the continuation of the blood coming from the chopped head. The most typical elements of the local constructions are the overhanging wood balconies which rest side by side like swallows' nests, reminiscent of Arabic traditions. The Auberge de Castille et Leon was the headquarters of the British military. Today, this wonderful palace is the residence of the Maltese Prime Minister, and also this is one of the most photographed sites of the capital. The upper Baroque gardens lying on the top of the almost 50-meter-high castle walls provide us a fascinating view of the big harbor. The knights like to meet here, have a walk, interchange ideas, and devise plans. The solid bastion surrounding the town is the most fearful fortress of Europe. There are 4 bastions defending the town from the continental side, and are intersected with tunnels. The bastions are connected by walls, and here there are also deep moats to strengthen the protection. Either examining from a high-altitude lookout point or from a ship, we can discover why the huge harbor consisting of protected bays was ideal for the knights' ships. They protected it by using the Byzantine method of tightened chains under the water. Each country or town has a kind of image associated to it. Here, those images are the Knights of Malta, the Maltese falcon, and the Maltese cross. These definitions are closely connected to each other and the past of the island. The St. John was established in the 11th century in Jerusalem by Raymond du Puy. The main aim was to help the people participating in the Crusades. Accordingly, they had clerical, military, and curative branches. Squeezed out from the Holy Land, the knights tried to settle down on Cyprus, and later, in 1306, they bought the Dodecanessos archipelago from pirates. The Johnnies became extremely rich because with the Pope's help, they obtained the property of the Knights Templar, as that order had been dissolved. The power of the knights who wore a red doublet above their chain armor with a white cross decoration on it was continuously increasing. Their army consisted of black galleys and played an important role in the trade sailing. On the island of Rhodes, we can still admire the Palace of the Grand Masters and the Street of Knights. In 1522, Suleiman's army of hundreds of thousands occupied Rhodes. The knights seemed to insist on the area of the Mediterranean Sea, and first retreated to Crete, and from there to Malta. And here comes the falcon to the scene. However, many of us probably know this bird rather from the Hammett crime story than from the history books. The knights had to give a falcon as a present to the Sicilian governor in each year, and in exchange they got the small barren island of Malta. The island was Sicilian property. The first headquarters of the knights were built up in Mdina. The great Suleiman, who perhaps regretted that he let the knights leave from Rhodes, besieged Malta. Repelling the attack required great sacrifices, 4 months, and the help of the Sicilian governor. After the victory, they were still afraid of repeated attacks. Therefore, they strengthened the defense of the islands. the Grand Master de la Vette, invited the best architects to establish the first European town by plan-based construction with impregnable fortresses all around. Today, the Knights' headquarters are in Rome, and their embassy is located in Valletta. This is the Cavalier building behind the St. John's Bastion. Sliema's name originates from the Arabic Salem, meaning peace. This is Malta's most recent and most fashionable holiday resort. We can have a bath in the small rocky bays. However, this kind of beach cannot really be mistaken for the Copacabana. Along the winding promenade, there are luxury apartments and hotels overhanging. At the end of the promontory, the huge casino building is located, close to Malta's highest building, the 24-story Porto Masso Tower. Shops and catering places border the way. The center of the quickly improving city is Paceville, which is a verdurous residential quarter on the hillside. Among the many modern houses, it's a real refreshment to our eyes to see the wonderfully decorated block. The local people like swimming in the sea. However, the hotels have their own bathing pools, and there's also a swimming pool where water polo matches are held from time to time. St. Julian's Bay shows different faces during daylight and in the evening floodlight. Most tourists spend the daytime in the hotel's bathing pools, or going out for a boat trip, or sightseeing in the town. In the evenings, crowds invade the restaurants, ice cream bars, discotheques, and bars of the St. Julian's Bay and its surroundings. On the whole island, the nightlife here is the biggest. The average age in the discotheques is extremely low, only 14 or 15 years, but older people can also find their own pleasure grounds. Luxury yachts and the fishermen's over-fatigued small boats peacefully coexist in the bay. Restaurants of many different categories and ethnicities can be found here, and the biggest shopping center of the island, the Bay Street Shopping Center. The local people love the 5-kilometer-long decoratively covered walking way with small terraces, buffet pavilions, parks, and playgrounds alongside. The Fortizza Fortress, originating from 1872, is very popular and is also functioning as a restaurant. Shipping to the east, we pass Valletta's awesome walls. The next noteworthy settlement is Marsaxlokk. Marsaxlokk means southeastern harbor. The harbor gives a happy picture, especially on weekends when a flea market is held along the bank of the bay. The fishermen pay attention to the painting of their boats. The colors are the same: blue, yellow, green, red, yet we cannot find two similarly painted boats in the harbor. Osiris's eye is painted on their sides, which protects the boat and its owner. The Expoza reminds us of the gondolas in Venice. The kajik is like a boat, while the bigger barks mainly used by the fishermen are called luzu. The shapes and colors of the boats have not really changed since the time of the Phoenicians. Of course, there's a fish market every day in the bay after the fishermen arrive with their latest catch. This is completed with a vegetable market. The products are delivered by ship from the island of Gozo. On Saturdays and Sundays, there are second-hand markets. It seems that the local people prefer markets to the shopping centers. One can hardly name a thing that cannot be obtained here. Marsaxlokk has no famous monuments, but its overall picture is typically Maltese. Napoleon landed here in 1798, but we cannot find any memory of this fact. We can find some pleasant terraced cafes and fish restaurants along the coast. Blue Grotto, namely Blue Cave. The most famous can be found on the island of Capri, but we can find similar ones on nearly every coast or island. All you need is a rocky cave or archway and the sunshine reflecting from the sea bottom, coloring the water to different shades of green or blue, depending on how deep the water is. This natural site provides a living for some clever boatmen all over the world, from Thailand to Corfu. The Maltese Blue Cave is especially nice, and the small harbour from where the boats are departing is singularly pleasant. Besides the cave, we can also admire two other formations similar to fjords. These are the Wiad Babu and the Wiad i Zuriek. Wiad means the same in the Maltese language as Wadi in the Arabic language, namely river valley or channel. The Blue Grotto is a 50-meter-long stalactite cave with some coral, although these are not so colorful as the tropical ones. The most amazing spectacle is in the morning hours, but each part of the day has its specialty. The cliff dropping abruptly to the water is broken by countless caves and hollows. In the distance of 6 kilometers, we can see the inhabited island of Filfla. The island was used by NATO for a long time, and even nowadays cannot be visited. On summer weekends, dozens of local children enjoy the water and sunshine here. The traditionally painted boats, the shining sun, the general noise of the beaches, and the salty smell of the sea together make our time spent here into a special experience. Close to the Blue Cave, there's a temple group which consists of 3 individual cultic places that later were surrounded by a common wall. This is an archaic world with a mysterious symbol. It was built 3,000 to 4,000 years before Christ, and the big question is the same here as with the Egyptian pyramids. How could people move those almost 20-ton rocks? According to the science findings, those huge stone tables were altars and served for presenting victims. Just like Stonehenge, Higar Quim also provides evidence that the beginning of human civilization is older than we imagine. The nearby Manadra is a similar megalithic church, which has been closed to visitors owing to repeated vandalism. Malta was the first European territory to adopt Christianity, and mainly due to the Johnny's 300-year reign, the inhabitants are still very religious. In addition, the love of holidays is very common here. On St. Peter's and St. Paul's days, the local church blesses the animals. Everyone comes with his own animal, like lambs, goats, or horses, or even house pets, like cats or dogs. A red mark is painted on the blessed animals. These festivals are not only holidays or spectacles, but also big events in the Maltese community life. In the Rabat Basket Garden, the pavilions, music bands, and several programs give a real picnic feeling. The highest point of the island is the 253-meter-high Gebel Siantaran. Here was built the small Maddalena Chapel, from which we can overlook to an amazing view. Under us is the giddy Dingley Precipice, and opposite in the sea there is the island of Filfla. Mdina was the former capital of the island. The Phoenicians established it, the Romans extended it, and the Arabs surrounded it with a city wall. Its name also indicates this. The Johnnies also survived here in the first Turkish siege, and here they decided on the building of Valletta. Mdina is also known as the Silent City. This is true because there's no car traffic in the area surrounded by the city walls. On the main gate, there's the crest of the Grand Master Manuel de Vilhena. Behind the city gate, costumed ushers coax us into a wax museum, which illustrates medieval torture and executions. A more pleasant sight is the Museum of Natural Sciences in front of us. In the continuation of the city gate, on Trikvilla Street, we find beautiful palaces and churches. Here are the palaces of one of the oldest noble families, the Casa Iguanes and the Benedictine Order Monastery. The old buildings of Mdina, like the Palazzo Santa Sofia or the Norman House, are real architectural curiosities. There were no windows on them to the outer side, but they were open towards their inner yards. The gap between their double walls has been filled with gravel to keep the rooms cool. With a short detour, we can visit an audiovisual show similar to that of Valletta. However, the old town by itself provides enough to see. On the main square is St. Paul's Cathedral, built in 1702 on the foundation of several old churches. There are 2 clocks on the cathedral showing different times in order to confuse the devil. Perhaps this is the reason why evil never sleeps? The flooring of the church here is also made of the knights' marble gravestones, like in the fellow cathedral in Valletta. The wonderful fresco is the work of Matteo Preti and shows the shipwreck of St. Paul. The Cathedral Museum also shows memories before the Great Earthquake of 1693. An interesting permanent exhibition can be admired in the Palazzo Notabile, entitled Medieval Times, while in the western direction we can see an exhibition illustrating the history of the Knights of Malta. The pleasant small bastion square can be found atop the Mdina city wall. It's fascinating to admire the St. Paul Bay, the Taqual, the airport, and even Valletta from a bird's-eye view without flying. According to the legend, the converted governor of Rome, Publius, saw St. Paul's shipwreck from here. Mosta is a small town on Middle Malta, close to the northwestern coast. Its only site is the huge Virgin Mary Church, also called the Rotunda. It was built, according to Vassay's plans, on the place of the smaller church. From 1833, volunteers were working on the construction. Its point of interest is the dome that can be clearly seen already from a big distance. Its diameter is 37 meters, and it's one of the largest domes in the world. During World War II, a bomb partly destroyed the dome, but it didn't blow up. What a miracle this must have seemed to the local people. George Bernard Shaw, well known for his dark humor, said, "If priests were trees, Malta would be in shade." Obviously, in Europe, we're no longer used to such an autocracy of the church. Those who want to marry here should first consider it carefully, because Malta is the only European country where divorce is impossible. In the neighborhood of the National Station and the airport, partly in the barracks of the old airport, is the Taquali Craftsman Center. This differs from the souvenir shops because here we can see how the gifts are produced. Perhaps the most interesting sight is the glass blowing. The products here are considerably cheaper than in the bazaars visited by the tourists. We can find countless knight figures in several variations, and also knickknacks decorated with the Maltese cross. Buying the lace of Gozo, and the different objects made by polishing small Maltese rocks. We can have individual presents which are obtainable only here. We sail over to the northwest, and we can find several pleasant beaches on both sides of the Marfa Ridge promontory. One of the best known is the Golden Bay. A rock towers between the two bays, giving a lovely view in all directions. The yellow sand of the Golden Bay is quite crowded during peak season. People come to have a bath even from Sliema, by car or bus. Those less interested in monuments, who mind the relative distance of the capital, like to spend their holidays here. We can also find quiet, lonely small bays between two artificial beaches, and those who like the water sports can find a wide range here. Water skiing and parachuting, jet skiing and diving. We can find all that is needed for an active vacation. As on all coastal settlements or islands, on Malta there's a wide range of different boating possibilities. There are also programs starting from Valletta and boating around the whole island. The long journey is interrupted by a cold buffet breakfast and a short rest in one of the splendid bays of Cominoto Island. Only the ochre sandstone rocks stand between the blue sky and the deep sea. The water in the bay is incredibly clear. We can see down very deep. Diving in it is a bit more difficult. The salinity of the Mediterranean Sea is quite high, even if not so high as that of the Red Sea, so it's harder to sink than to stay afloat. There are countless types of ships and boats in the bay, from the modern copy of the former pirate ship up to the boring pleasure boat and snow-white luxury yacht. There are small motorboats delivering ice cream, inflatable boats and small fishing boats. The place is ideal for the windsurfers and the light divers. The high-powered motorboats called Yellow Fun represent a vivid patch of color. They show the local small blue caves and cliffs, zigzagging on the water all the while, spraying the passengers with water. This is an attraction you shouldn't leave out, although you have to pay for it separately. Surely, those who spend their holidays here will have a look at the pictures again and again during the cold winter evenings, because here you can find the summer, the sea, and all happiness of the vacation together. To visit Gozo, we have to use a ferry boat, which is important for those who rent a car on Malta. There's a bit quicker, but a bit more expensive solution, as a helicopter also links the two islands. You can think of it as a sightseeing flight, but after landing, you should either rent a car on Gozo or use the bus. The island of Gozo is similar to Malta. The main difference is that while on the big island, the industry, the trade, and the tourism are dominant, on Gozo, agriculture has an important role. The whole island is greener and more sparsely inhabited, calmer. The number of inhabitants on the 67 square kilometer territory of Gozo doesn't even reach 30,000. The ferry boats arrive to Magar Harbour. Here, we suggest visiting the Our Lady of Lourdes Church. Those fond of water sports can find several possibilities here also. Even diving courses are held. The inhabitants of Gozo state they are different, even better than those of Malta. There's a friendly competition between the two islands. The pop star Mdina prefers Gozo. Here's the hidden luxury hotel where she likes to hide from the paparazzi. A great tourist magnet is a wonderful cliff, the best-known site of Gozo, which often graces local postcards. There are people who visit the small island only for this. The sea window, or the Azure Window, is like a megalithic bridge. The inner sea, surrounded by the cliffs, is in connection with the open sea. Good swimmers can cross this way through the lagoon, but it's safer to use a boat. Fungus Cliff is also part of this beautiful land. This is a bird reserve, and entry is prohibited without permission. Gozo also has its holiday resorts, even if those are more quiet and modest than those of the towns on the Big Island. The original name of the capital was Rabat, which in Arabic means town outside the walls, but the British renamed it to Victoria in honor of the Queen. The point of interest of Victoria Cathedral is that it has no dome, as there was no money for it. Italian painter Antonio Manuel solved the problem with a brilliant optical trick and painted the ceiling fresco as if there really were a dome. Two museums connect to the church, the cathedral and the archaeological. The Rabat Citadel was the retreat for the people of Gozo during pirate attacks. The legendary place of the Zagros Plateau is Calypso's cave. It would be interesting to know how the legend was born that this is that particular cave where the nymph Calypso kept Odysseus in prison for 7 years, until, by the order of Zeus, she had to let him go. During the great earthquake of 1693, part of the cave fell in. Today, the visible part can be visited free of charge. It's interesting that on the ferry boat we have to pay only for the way to Malta. Returning to Malta, let's see some sights of the Marfa Peninsula. The name of the nearby Paradise Bay promises ideal circumstances for the bathing visitors. At one time, there were considerably fewer people in Paradise. Today, lovers cannot have the privacy, and the use of deck chairs and shower were free. Despite this fact, the beach is pleasant and popular, especially because of the sandy coast side, which is very rare on Malta. Popeye Village was built in 1979 as scenery to Robert Altman's film. Robin Williams fans probably remember the otherwise not too successful comedy. The scenery village itself stands in a scenic area on the Bay Coast, and, for a small entrance fee, offers several programs for the children. Malta's real touristic sites are the old yellow buses that transfer the passengers between the settlements. There are 4 settlements in the St. Paul Bay: Ora, Bugiba, St. Paul, and Semsia. These settlements function as holiday resorts alongside the lovely bay, with modern hotels and entertaining places. We can find hardly any sights here, except one, the Ora Tower from the 16th century, which presently cannot be visited. Nearby, there are the so-called wheel tracks. These small grooves are similar in age to the megalithic churches. Many compare them to the Nazca lines, and if we solve their secret, perhaps they would answer the question of how multi-ton rocks were transported thousands of years before Christ. People come here for the pleasure of the sea and sunshine and the wide variety of relatively cheap hotels. As the island is small and the transportation is good, the inhabitants here don't miss anything. Due to the light Mediterranean climate, it's generally warmer and drier on Malta than on the continent. In April, there's already good weather that lasts till September, and the sea is warm enough for bathing. There are few green areas on Malta, and there are no rivers or lakes. The surface of the islands is karst plateau. Fresh water is produced by extracting the salt from the seawater or collecting rainwater in cisterns. There are no high mountains either. Malta's highest point is only 253 meters. The uneven beach is rocky or with gravel and with few sandy bays. The sea is very clear and the number of sunny hours is extremely high. The dry warm is cooled by a light wind blowing in from the sea. Over the centuries, Phoenicians, Carthaginians, Byzantines, Arabs and Vikings, and later the Italians, French and British visited here. The descendants of the nations living here for shorter and longer periods have intermixed, giving birth to Malta's inhabitants. They love their home and don't want to sacrifice it on the altar of the mass tourism. Perhaps for this reason, they treat all foreigners as guests. If we accept their calm, southern speed, we'll enjoy ourselves here. If we just sit on the terrace of a cafe, admire the sunset above the sea, sail over to one of the quiet bays, or visit a colorful event, we can understand what makes people come to Malta. The people in Malta like fireworks as much as the Chinese who invented them. They're also expert in them and produce them as well. The firecrackers are produced in several small factories, and no church or temporal event can exist without fireworks on Malta. Each village has its own patron saint, and each saint has its own event with a procession and music. The Muarja is especially popular. The name originates from the Italian word luminaria, meaning flood lighting. Originally, it was the harvest celebration, but later the event became larger and grew to a huge open-air amusement. The bonfires and the color flood lighting, of course, remained. The fireworks often last for hours.